My name is Kara, and I am the Field Education Coordinator. Before we start, I want to acknowledge the land we're meeting on today, Treaty 6 territory and the homeland of the Métis. It's really nice to see you out early on a Friday morning. I'm saying that kind of sarcastically because I don't like mornings either, if anyone shares with me in that. Okay, so let's do another round. Today's going to be, I think, hopefully very enjoyable for you. We have 6 students from the 448 Practicum class coming at 10:30 today to talk about their Practicum experiences with you. And it's basically gonna be a panel. You can ask them anything you'd like to ask them. And they are going to share their knowledge with you. So I think that'll be really exciting. Before that, we're gonna talk about professionalism, and we're also gonna run through how many of you are gonna come on November 17th to the Practicum launch. Quite a few of you, most of you, I guess. Great. So there is a commitment to professional practice that we're going to, and to our practice we will read that night at that ceremony. So I'm just going to share it with you today, so you have a sense of what it is. You know what you're reading. We can even go through it, reading it once together. Could be kind of fun. But before we do that, let's do another round of introductions as we did last week, so you can start to get to know each other's names. And I'd like to know what you do for self-care. And if you don't do anything for self-care right now, what you aspire to do for self-care. And if you say, what the heck does self-care mean? Good question. The things you do to take care of yourself that aren't going to work and going to school, that you enjoy doing, hopefully, or that are good for your soul in some way or other. So can we start? Let's start on this side today, and I'll pass the mic around. Yeah.
I'm Arthi. For self-care, I take a lot of bubble baths, and I go biking a lot and just be in nature. That's my self-care.
My name is Brendan Resch. For self-care, I like to meditate, breathe, yoga.
My name is Sarah. For self-care, I like to spend time with my family, with my little guy. He always brings a smile to my face. And just kind of maybe spending some time by myself, relaxing, watching some TV.
My name is Michelle, and for self-care, I walk my friend's dogs because I have a dog, and I go to the SPCA and walk the dogs there as well.
My name is Amy Harper.
No one's got
And I like to take time off work and get a babysitter and go out once in a while because I never do that. And also go out, exercise, and go for walks.
My name is Sierra, and for self-care, I'd like to have a nice glass of wine in the tub and watch some TV, and also like to sleep a lot as well. So.
Hi, I'm Brienne, and I like to take nature walks and bubble baths.
My name is Autumn, and for self-care, I like to play with my dogs, taking them out for walks, and I also like going to full fitness.
Hi, my name is Louise, and I also like taking nature walks and just being out in, especially out in the, and just away from others.
My name is Leah, and for self-care, I like to play my ukulele.
My name's Sharon, and for self-care, I like to meditate and do yoga.
Hi, my name's Alexis. For self-care, I like to do, like Louise, I like to get away from people and be by myself and kind of self-reflect.
Hey, my name is Manda, and for self-care, I would like to read and go for bike rides.
Hi, I'm Sam, and for self-care, I like to run and take my dogs out.
Hi, I'm Sophia. For self-care, I like to be outside and
when I can plan trips and get away.
My name is Cassidy, and for self-care, I like to cuddle with my dog on the couch.
Oh, sure. My name's Carolyn, and for self-care, I like to read. I also like to cook, and I like to power lift. Though I don't know if that's actually self-care. It does more harm to my body than anything.
Hi, my name is Candice. I like hiking and cooking and traveling. That's probably self-care.
Hey, my name's John. I like reading, exercising different kinds like yoga, get lots of classes.
Hi, I'm Kim. I like to meditate, I like to walk, and I love to travel.
Hi, my name is Tony, and for self-care, I like to spend lots of time with my kids and my wife.
Hi, I'm Galaxy. Self-care always looks different for me, but right now it's currently in my apartment so that I feel more like home.
Hi, I'm Brandon Bear, and for self-care, I like to go for long drives, reading. I find my cats are very therapeutic as well, and of course naps.
My name is Travis. I love to be on the water, kayaking and hiking and traveling. And tomorrow I'm going to go to Manitou and Soap. So,
I'm Trevor, and I like meditating and doing yoga.
Hi, I'm Katie, and on the weekend I like to spend lots of time with my husband and our daughter, and we also take turns sleeping in and getting up, so that's awesome.
I'm Erin. I like to play hockey, which is really relaxing in a weird way. And I love to read and go to my family farm.
I'm Courtney. I like to, odd as it sounds, I like to clean. I find it helps me like work out some frustration. Cook, and also I do like to be by myself too, so I find it just really cozy.
I'm Riley, and I like to read, journal, go outside, exercise, and listen to music.
Hi, I'm Morgan. I like to wear just fluffy stuff ever, as long as it's away from everything. And I read.
Hi, I'm Michael. For self-care, I like read and play computer games.
Hi, I'm Marie Sean, and I like to paint and read.
Hi, my name is Corey. I like to shop and I like to sleep and I like to clean too.
Hi, my name is Alyssa. I like to go for walks and watch Netflix and bake. But last night after a few midterms this week, I had some wine and went in a hot tub, and that was good self-care.
Hi, my name is Ashley. For self-care, I like to do stuff by myself, whether that be reading or napping or cooking.
My name's Carrie, and I enjoy doing puzzles and listening to Harry Potter on audiobook.
Thanks, everyone. Those were great. I like doing crosswords. And sometimes I just buy a newspaper just to do the crossword because I like the feeling of the paper more than in a book, which my husband says is wasteful, but you can recycle newspapers. So, thank you so much. I was really struck by a few things that you said, which I thought were really interesting. Number one, I always like asking this question because then everyone else kind of gets ideas, like, oh, I actually really like doing that, but I don't make enough time to do that, or whatever. I noticed that a huge number of you like being alone. Raise your hand if you like being alone. Yeah, and it's interesting because often this profession attracts extroverts, right? Who get their energy from being around people. And certainly, as an introverted person in this field, it really made me happy to see all these other people who get their energy from being alone. So it's really important, I think, even if you are someone who gets energy from being with others, you may also still really value alone time. But it was just neat to hear that for a lot of you, that's what self-care is. It's just being away from others and by yourself. So that was kind of neat to hear that. I think the first time I've ever heard that in such a large group of social work students, so pretty interesting. The reason we do this also is because when you start doing your practicums, I think the emotional labor that is involved in the work that we do becomes very clear, and we start to really feel the effects of it. And I can still remember how I felt after my first practicum days. I would come home and basically could barely make dinner and then would fall asleep. I would be so exhausted. And it wasn't like I was doing physical activity, it was the emotional and mental labor I was doing all day that just totally wiped me out. And so I think it gets easier with time, but you really need to kind of have those self-care strategies already in place when you start your practicums, because you're gonna need to pull on them from time to time. And there are a few of you in here who are already in practicum 1, and you will probably know what I'm talking about, that exhaustion that comes with just being there and doing that work all day, and all the learning too that you're doing constantly. So self-care is really absolutely wrapped up in what it means to be a professional too. It's part of our ethical duty to be taking care of ourselves in the work that we do. But kind of on that note, what does professionalism mean to you? When you see that word, what do you think of? Oh, particular kind of word. Tony, yeah.
Honesty.
Honesty, yeah.
Like you're reliable.
Yeah, absolutely. Honesty and reliability, those are really good words that go with that. Anything else?
Upholding the values of the agency.
Mm-hmm. Upholding the values of the agency, absolutely. Yeah.
Confidentiality.
Yeah. In the corner?
I would say educated and informed.
Educated and informed.
Respect.
Respect. Integrity. It's starting to sound like something we talked about last time. Yeah, yes.
Appropriate punctuality.
Punctuality.
Appropriate boundaries.
Appropriate boundaries, absolutely. Anything else you'd add?
Cultural competence.
Cultural competence, absolutely. Anything else?
Keeping personal stuff personal and not sharing every personal detail of your life with clients.
Oh yeah, that's a good one. Absolutely. Yeah. Well, that kind of goes with those boundaries. Any other thoughts about professionalism?
Not showing up like you're going to the club.
Not showing up like you're going to the club. Yeah. Anything else? Yeah, that's something Penny always would talk about. Is if you're wearing it to the club, you probably shouldn't be wearing it to practicum. Depends on what you wear to the club, I suppose. Okay, so we have the successful social work practicum student. There you go, dresses appropriately. And what do you guys think about dresses appropriately? Because I think there's a bit of a spectrum with this in terms of, do you think you need to go in a power suit to work every day? Why not?
Power.
Yeah. Any other reasons why?
It's super uncomfortable.
Yeah. Really uncomfortable.
It may not be suitable for the agency that you're working with.
Yes, exactly. Exactly. So if you're working with kids, let's say in a group home, you walking around in a power suit is going to be kind of uncomfortable for you and not necessarily appropriate to the environment, right? So you should be wearing things that you feel comfortable in and that are appropriate to the environment, right? And I think social work as a profession is fairly casual. Can we think of some exceptions? Policymakers.
Oh, sorry, I heard the question.
Oh,
I was
it's
going to
okay.
say examples of when it wouldn't be professional.
Yeah.
I was just going to say working in group homes.
Oh, yeah, sorry, yeah, absolutely. No worries, it's okay. Don't worry about it. Where else might you need to kind of take on a bit of more formal dress?
Maybe court.
Yeah, court, exactly. Court is one of them. Any others?
If you're meeting with government, like if you're meeting with government officials or
Yeah.
or
So
other
you-
agencies or meetings or
Yeah.
something like that.
Yeah, exactly. And also being sensitive to the fact that if you're wearing certain things that might be offensive to other people, right? Like certain slogans on our shirts or, things like that. So just being mindful of that. Okay, communicates clearly, concisely, and respectfully. I mean, I think that's pretty obvious, right? That if for example, what would you do if you're going to be late? You'd call them. Would anyone not call? Would anyone email instead of calling? Yeah, maybe? Depending on what your situation is, right? But you'd let them know, certainly. What about if you have a problem in your practicum? What are you going to do?
Talk to your supervisor.
Yeah, what if your supervisor doesn't care?
Talk to their supervisor.
Tony, yeah.
You just go for the proper chain of command, right?
Pardon me?
You just go for a proper chain of command. Like,
So what is that though?
Then you just probably talk to somebody, like, are you talking about the work environment or just?
I want to know what you're going to do is, let's say you're at your practicum, you're having an ethical dilemma, you go to your supervisor, you don't feel like your supervisor gave you the information you need. Where do you go next?
Whoever's filling Penny's role?
No? Yeah?
Like your coworkers?
Your coworkers potentially.
Could you discuss it at seminar with the professor as well as the?
Yes. So your field liaison is the next person you would go to, right? So Penny's role, Penny places you, right? But that's not her role to kind of help you if you're having problems in your practicum. If you do contact her, she'll direct you to the right person to go to, which is usually your seminar instructor. But that's not her role because she's busy trying to find placements for everyone. So any other thoughts about that? So certainly your seminar instructor is a good option. Your colleagues at work, being mindful of the potential situation.
Can I just ask who that will be next year?
Pardon me?
Who is that person going to be next year? Is that you? Like, who's the field liaison?
Oh, so it always changes. So there's different people who teach those classes.
Okay.
So because there's so many of you, there will probably be three 4-8 classes. And I think there's 1 or 2 4-8 classes. So I'm actually not teaching one of those next semester, but you will know absolutely who that person is. If you have a problem leading up to your practicum beginning, Penny is the person to go to. Do we say who Penny's replacement is yet? Or is that official?
I don't think so.
Okay, then no. So right now, Penny. She's still in the role till the 17th. So if you go to your field liaison person and they can't help you, that's when you end up coming to me, right? So that's kind of how it goes. Usually it stops at your field liaison. They can help you out. They'll sometimes arrange a meeting with your supervisor to talk about things, or they'll talk with you individually. They'll help you strategize and come up with a plan. Does that make sense? It's hard because right now you're like, who is this imaginary person who's going to help me? But it is essentially your teacher for your seminar. We call them field liaisons just because we like to keep things complicated. But it's essentially your teacher for your seminar. Any questions about that? That's clear?
Can I just mention one thing?
Yeah, of course.
Supervising students, can you hear me?
Yeah.
Do I need this?
Yeah.
Okay.
I see what you're doing.
Supervising students, I find that sometimes you're in practicum and stuff comes up and you feel scared to approach your field liaison. Your midterm evaluation is also a checking point to bring those things up, so communicate before that time.
Yeah, and if again, just for your information, and this, you don't need to memorize all this, we're just telling it to you now, and then you can be reminded again in January. But when you start your practicum, you essentially will have a midterm evaluation and a final evaluation. And your midterm one, your field liaison actually comes to your practicum and meets with you and your supervisor and talks to you about how things are going. So you can always use that, as Carolyn's saying, as a good point to say, hey, things aren't going so well for me, or I have questions, or whatever. Okay. So, is attentive. What do we think about cell phones out at practicum? Our personal cell phones, that is.
Disrespectful.
Yeah, probably. Any other thoughts?
Not appropriate.
Yeah, and one thing I've learned from my students is that you know, sometimes they've complained to me like, my supervisor always has her phone out. And so then I started doing it, and then I heard from her or from another coworker that I shouldn't have my phone out. So it's unfair, the rules that apply to me don't apply to her. And I say, yeah, that's really unfortunate, but at the same time, you know, you kind of have to go with the flow. So I think demonstrating and role modeling good work culture around your own phone use is a good way to actually impress your colleagues at your practicum, and also maybe serves as a good reminder to them, maybe I shouldn't always be on Instagram at work either, you know? Yeah.
I would say like, maybe discuss the cell phone use with your supervisor. Like for instance, for myself personally, my son is going to be in daycare full-time starting in January, so I would like the option to maybe have it not like up and out all the time, but in case there's an emergency with him at daycare, to be able to answer my phone.
100%.
Right, like so just
Absolutely.
to explain that situation, like I'm not gonna be on my phone all day, but if it's okay for me to, you know, have it in my desk drawer so that I can hear it ringing, if it, you know, if there's an emergency with daycare, I would like that option. Right?
And that's
like,
totally reasonable,
to be,
right?
To be afforded that, or, you know, I'm caring for my mother and she's in the hospital and I need to hear from the hospital or something, right?
Yeah, you make very good points. So I think absolutely having that discussion is a good idea, because there needs to be that kind of flexibility.
Yeah, having the discussions is a good idea, totally too. And I work at a homeless shelter, and we are told to keep our cell phones on us at all times, like not out necessarily, but on us just in case like emergencies happen and we don't have to come upstairs to the office to use the phone, or like it's a women's shelter. And one time a guy got into the house and the girls were downstairs cleaning and they didn't have their phones on them. So they just like hid for like hours.
Oh no.
And now it's a requirement that we all have cell phones on ourselves.
Yeah, that makes sense. So figuring out what the needs and the policies are of where you're working, right? And then also, what do you need in your own personal life in terms of family commitments, that sort of thing. Very good. Okay. Does anyone here have trouble being punctual? Yeah, it's a thing. My brother has trouble being punctual, and he's a single father to a 5-year-old who he has to get to daycare every morning before he gets to work. They live in Ontario. And so he sets every single alarm he owns and clock 20 minutes early. So it's actually very disturbing being in this car, because you're like, what time is it? But he finds it helpful because he knows that if he's at least leaving when he's supposed to be there, he's still going to be on time. That's a strategy that works for him. But if you're someone who has trouble being punctual, certainly trying to figure out what is going to work for you. Because again, unfortunately or fortunately, depending on your perspective, I think in these kind of these agency contexts, people do value punctuality, especially if you have an appointment with someone, you got to be at court. If you've got to go and meet someone somewhere, if they're counting on you to be there, you need to be on time. And again, I'm telling you these things that seem obvious, but I'm also someone who has been a field liaison a couple times around now, and these are complaints I get from supervisors, right? My student's not on time, my student shows up late, my student shows up 10 minutes late and thinks it's fine, I don't think it's fine, those sorts of things. So again, if you're going to be late or if there's any issues, you might want to check in with your supervisor about how relaxed or not relaxed they are about punctuality. Yeah?
I think like even if you work in an agency that's like really relaxed about that stuff, it's still, even if they are really relaxed, it's good to just like be on time and not use your cell phone or whatever, because they're also being asked to grade you. So like even if everyone else like who works there is late all the time, they're not being graded, you are. So this is all gonna go back to your prof.
Totally, and you have a number of hours you have to do, so you might as well show up on time, because that'll help get them over with sooner, right?
Yeah.
The later you are, the longer those hours are gonna take. Yeah, absolutely. Any other thoughts? Okay, great. Okay, so does anyone know about our student professional performance policy? No, okay, well, we're gonna go over it. We have it in place, which you'll have to adhere to. So then we've got the maintains professional boundaries with clients and colleagues. We talked about boundaries a bit last week in terms of ethics, but I'm curious what your thoughts are on things like And again, these things come up a lot. So things like clients wanting to add you on Facebook, clients wanting to text you, colleagues wanting to text you after work. What do we think? Yeah, Brandon.
I'd say if there was like a connection for a friendship, maybe just save it till after you're done your practicum placement.
Yeah. Yeah, if there's any kind of, connection with a friendship with a client, you mean? Or with a coworker?
I guess both.
With both, okay, yeah. Yeah, and in some cases, it may never be appropriate to have a friendship with a client. Yeah, for lots of different reasons, yeah.
Never complain about your practicum or your practicum supervisor or anything on Facebook.
Oh, yes, please don't do that. Yes, really, really good point. Please never, ever do that, ever. Oh my goodness, I have seen people do that, not at this institution, but when I was working in Montreal, I definitely knew people were complaining about their practicums on Facebook. It's like, how, you seem like a smart person, how is this a good idea? It's not a good idea. And Facebook is just, everyone can read it. It's very upsetting when you see that happening. And actually, people have lost their jobs for talking about their jobs on Facebook. Yeah, for sure. Someone else had a hand up.
I'm curious about boundaries in terms of people that you've known before you started working at the agency that you did.
Yeah.
I'm just wondering if you have any pointers.
I think it always depends. It depends on the context. It depends on your involvement with them. It depends on your previous relationship with them. I would say, and again, this stuff comes up a lot, but say you go into your practicum and your neighbor is going to be a client there. I would really immediately tell your supervisor that you've got a conflict of interest and see how you can either not have any involvement with that client or only have involvement with them agreeing to it. Like, we're clearly neighbors, so this is gonna, I'm happy to step out and not have anything to do with this, and let them kind of decide too. Again, it's so context dependent because there's certain settings where it would be totally inappropriate, and then there's others where it might be okay, right? It depends. But it's tricky, and it will come up. The most important thing is transparency, right? And respecting the person whose confidentiality is at risk. So that's always the client. And so you're putting them first in your decision making. So there shouldn't be a kind of sneaking around, like you hiding, that sort of thing. Like if you know that they're there, there should be some sort of acknowledgement of that. And then as I'm stepping out because I know this. Yeah. Yeah.
I just want to state, so I worked at IA in Prince Albert.
What is that?
Income assistant.
Oh, okay.
At social services, and there was a time when
I'm going to give you a mic.
Okay.
Just because it's probably a word historian.
There was a time when I knew one of the clients, like before I worked there.
Okay.
And I had to like work with them, and so like I told my supervisor, like I know this person. I'm not like friends with them now, but I was in the past, whatever. And so what they did was they asked the client if it's okay if so-and-so works with you, if not, we can get you someone else, and then they were okay with it. And they asked me, are you okay with working with them? And I said yes. So like I worked with the person.
But there was some transparency there. Yeah, very nice. Good example. Any other examples or thoughts about that? Yeah, yeah.
I've worked places where like people have no clients, and sometimes it can, like there's a little bit of favoritism, it looks like. And so just to be careful around that you're not going above and beyond it, you need somebody else.
Yeah, that's a really good point, right? Yeah, I think we see that a lot in places like hospitals, right? If you go into a hospital and you're a patient in a hospital and you know people there, you get like A+ treatment. Ew, kind of, right? It's ew. Everyone should be getting A+ treatment. Yeah. Any other thoughts? Okay. Boundaries these are things that's why we have seminars while you're doing your practicum, because this comes up constantly, all of these kinds of questions. And there's never a simple answer. There's never a, oh, of course you would do this, right? It's so context dependent, and it always depends on all of the various kind of intersecting factors that are at play. Okay, and then we have that you're gonna take care of yourselves, because emotional labor is real. It really is. So that's so important. So again, if you feel like something at Practicum is bringing up other issues for you emotionally or personally, you need to kind of take care of that fast. So either you tell your supervisor, you tell your field liaison, and you come up with a plan of how you're going to take care of yourself. Because we don't want this to be a horrible, triggering experience for anyone. We want it to be beneficial and about learning. So if you, something about being there, and this is why too, you know, when you do those interviews, that's why Penny asks you all those things, like, where do you want to work? Where do you absolutely not want to work, right? Because she's trying to get a sense of those areas that might be tricky for you, and to respect that, right? Because we want this to be a positive experience. Okay. So sometimes we have some issues that come up in Practicum around student conduct. Can anyone think of what sort of things might happen?
I know I've heard a lot from like people that are in Practicum right now of others sharing stories about clients in their Practicum, and knowing that you do have a seminar where that you can talk about that in a safer space, and it's not necessarily appropriate to talk outside of there because it can breach that confidentiality.
Yeah, so breaching confidentiality is a big one that people sometimes have trouble with. Things like taking files home, or sometimes you might do it totally accidentally too, right? Like, things happen, but taking files home, or yeah, telling your family member who you saw that day, what their name was, what they were going through. Any other examples?
Yeah.
It's the door.
Oh.
It's just the door just kind of opening itself.
It sounded kind of like a river. Any other examples? Oh, yeah, Sharon, yeah.
Thanks. So yeah, like just continuing to respect diversity and honor the fact that people are different, and just making sure that it's client-centered.
Yeah, so if someone didn't do that, that in their practicum they could, yeah, absolutely. That's a really good point. Yeah, Tony.
Gossiping.
Pardon me?
Gossiping.
Gossiping. Mm-hmm. Yep. What do you mean?
Let's say if you're a practicum student and you're not getting along with one of the staff, and then talking to another staff regarding the other staff and not approaching it
Yeah.
properly.
Yeah, absolutely.
You know, and then just going and talking to everybody about it.
Yeah.
I was just gonna say, like, language you use, not using like too much jargon or anything like that, and I guess it kind of goes with like being professional too.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, just like how you say things and.
Yeah, totally. So some of these things might, yeah, you might run into that you might have your supervisor say, hey, that was actually really inappropriate for these reasons. Or actually you just breached confidentiality, right? A little bit more on the serious end of things. So there's a spectrum of things that can happen. Certainly we try to prepare you so that they don't happen, but there's lots of different reasons why we might run into issues with student conduct. And so to kind of deal with that, the university has a student professional performance policy, and this exists outside of academic performance. So it is designed like specifically for things like Practicum. And the reason we did this is because, you know, at Practicum you're not going to get called out for plagiarism or something like that, right? Like these are non-academic concerns, but they have to do with you working with vulnerable persons and needing to uphold a code of ethics in your practice. So certainly these are our grounds for action. So if you conduct yourself in a way that contravenes any section of the CASW Code of Ethics, if you have conducted yourself in a way that contravenes the standards of ethical practices for social workers in Saskatchewan or any other SASW practice standard. If you have concealed or distorted the truth in completing your application to get into the university in the first place, and if you have impaired judgment or functioning in any client contact. So outcomes range from being requested to demonstrate your understanding of the error to being discontinued from the program. So this is the policy we would use should there be an allegation made about your non-academic performance in practicum. And that's how we would decide, make decisions. So involved in that decision making would mostly be your field liaison, your practicum supervisor, myself, and the associate dean, Miguel Sanchez. So we would be all working together on that. Does this happen very often? No. Do we need to tell you about it? Yes. So that you're aware and to know that we take this seriously. And so, you know, when we first started doing these practicum workshops, people were like, oh, why are we doing this? It seems like we already know all these things. Like, yeah, absolutely, you know a lot of these things, but we take these things super seriously because we're trusting you to go out and work with the most vulnerable people in our community. So that's kind of a big deal as far as I'm concerned. So that's why we do this. That's why we try to prepare you so that when you head out into practicum, you're feeling confident and you're feeling not at all concerned that you're going to run into any issues. Yeah.
I was told by a boss once that rules exist for because somebody has done that, and so that rule needs to come into play.
Yeah, exactly. That's what. Yeah, exactly. So yeah, we don't invent these things for no reason, right? So certainly. And it makes our job easier too if we have a set of standards and guidelines and we trust you, we teach them to you and then we trust you with them. It also speaks to, we want you to graduate from this program and be proud to have a degree from here because we really took the code of ethics seriously. We really made sure that you felt ready in your practice and we really gave you some interesting practice experiences. So that whole thing, I think, is something that not to scare you, but to have you feel proud of the fact that you are really upholding yourself to a high standard here. That's all. Any questions about that? Okay. So, we're at the point of, I'm curious, are there any like practicum questions or concerns just kind of logistically before we move into the going over the professionalism statement we have? Yeah.
Penny had mentioned that there's a new thing, a collaboration of a project, but it's not counting towards our practicum hours. So it's something that we have to do in our own time for major practicum, not for 448.
Yeah, I can explain that. So we're now asking students in 448 to do 6 hours of professional development. We provide an option for you for what that can look like, which is something called interprofessional problem-based learning, which is housed out of the University of Saskatchewan. And it is a interdisciplinary group that gets together 3 times for 6 hours total. And you meet at the U of S and essentially you have a case and you work on the case together. So you would be working with doctors, nurses, dentists, physiotherapists, nutritionists, I feel like I'm forgetting one, pharmacists, and so you all sit around a table and you have a case and the case kind of unfolds. And it's actually really cool. You learn a lot. And you also learn about perceptions of your profession in the community. So you positive or negative, and you can kind of articulate the role of social work within this framework. So it's great in terms of interdisciplinary practice and learning. So you can do that, which we highly encourage you to do because we think it's a really amazing learning opportunity. Or say you wanted to do something that was specific to your area of interest, like a conference or a workshop or a couple of workshops or a talk being held in the community. It can be really anything. You just have to tell your seminar instructor, for my 6 hours, I'm going to do these things. And they're like, great, no problem. The reason we do that is, guess which code of ethics we're worried about? Confidence, exactly. So we want to make sure that even though, because when you go into a practice experience, you're getting a pretty, I don't want to say narrow, but you're getting a specific experience. And so you're learning in one place for 4 months, and you're going to seminar and talking about it, but we want it to be a little bit more enhanced. That's why we added that requirement. We'll also be lowering the number of hours starting next semester for 448, which will be exciting, to 470 hours to make room for that. We've shifted around the hours a little bit, so it will be a little bit easier to complete those hours in time, because students are feeling pretty pushed to get those hours done. Yeah.
So with that, we received an email from the University of Regina, like main campus, that they will be offering 448 spring, summer with limited, like not with certain agencies. Does that apply to us?
Yes, it does. Yes, good question. So summer 448 is offered this summer for the very last time. We are phasing out summer 448 for a few reasons. The main one being we can't find enough practicums for our students. The supervisors are all on holidays and don't want to supervise students. So we will offer it with the caveat that A, we may not be able to find you a placement, B, it may not be the one that you want. But they will be offered. It's just that government, social services, health region don't want students in the summer. So if that's where you see yourself for a 448 placement, those options are limited or non-existent. And the other agencies, a lot of people found that their supervisors weren't there. So hearing these experiences, we've decided to get rid of 448, but we do know that some of you had that in your course plan, so it's being offered this summer to accommodate that. Yeah.
So you said it's down to 470 hours. What was it before?
480.
480.
Yeah. It may not seem like a lot, but I think for a lot of students, they're like, it's a big deal. Yeah.
And how many, is it 6 hours of seminar per month?
Nope, it is, actually, yeah, so it's 21 hours of seminar total, 7 sessions. Usually they're every other week. That's for both 348 and 448. Yeah. Yeah.
I have a question as to picking classes and doing our practicum in the winter.
Yeah.
Do we know what days that we're going to be at these agencies so that we can make sure that we're able to pick the classes we need?
You decide with the agency what days you're there. Yeah. So as long as the only thing you absolutely can't miss is seminar.
And that's Friday.
That's usually Fridays, but not always. So it's a little bit complicated. I think that they will try to get those seminar times out. They're usually out by November at the latest, and so that you can know by then what you're picking and how you're arranging it. And then when you have your interview with the agency, you can say, I have class these days, could I come these days? Or some people do things like 1 whole day, 2 half days. Usually, it depends on the agency, but usually they're pretty flexible. Yeah.
So it's 15 hours per week for the practicum?
It is 200 and, so it was 225, and it's going to be 230 hours next semester.
So could you I think it's in there.
I think it's 15 to 17-ish hours a week. Usually it's 2 days a week, period.
Could you do more than that in a week?
No, so you can only occasionally. It's an iffy question. Here's the situation. You have 4 months to do those 230 hours, and in that time, we want you to actually be showing up every week at your agency and learning. Why? Because we know that you can't learn everything in a week. You can't even process it. And we also want you to form relationships that go over those 4 months. So we want you to start practicum on time, and we want you to end it on time. Let's say you get sick in the middle of October and you miss a day. No problem. You can make that day up the following week. That's not a big deal. But if you're like, I want to be done practicum by, let's use January to April as an example. I want to be done practicum by March. No, you have to do practicum till April. It's got to be spread out over the whole time. So for those of you, this is important, for those of you planning holidays or anything like that, don't plan them during this time because you have to be present in practicum. Those hours are a must. So if you want to take a holiday, save it for the summer or do it before.
And do you know when the summer practicum starts?
It usually starts in May.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Are there
Right? Yeah.
I was just going to ask, are there any agencies that do 12-hour shifts?
I don't know that answer. That's not my area.
I don't think so.
I don't think so. Yeah. I don't think so. Yeah. Oh, yeah, either one of you, and then I'll go to the other one after. Yeah.
Do you know when do we need to apply for 448 if we are wanting to do it this summer?
I do not know that answer. It will be posted.
Okay.
Do you know what the last day of practicum is in April?
No.
You have to read the course calendar.
I know, you have to read the course calendar. I'm no. Numbers, dates, I'm the wrong person. There you go.
Yeah, we were told January 8th to April 27th.
Okay, perfect. January 8th to April 27th. Thank you, thank you. As you can see, not my area of expertise. I don't know.
I'm pretty sure that Penny had said for if you're gonna do the 448, the session for if they were gonna offer summer practicum would be the same as if you were gonna do fall. So it would be during our so next term.
Perfect.
We would be having these workshops for that.
Actually, so now that you've done these workshops, you don't have to do them again.
Oh yeah, that's.
So you don't have to do this for 448. You're good. After today, you're good. Yeah, that's what we wanted. We wanted to set it up so you're good to go. We don't need to repeat the same information between times. You know what you're doing, and you'll have your practicum launch celebration, and then you'll be off and ready. So it doesn't matter if you do it in the summer or the fall. You don't need to do this again. Makes sense? Everyone's like, ah. Hey, yeah,
I just
okay.
want to clarify something. So come January, we have let's say every other Friday we have those seminars.
Yeah.
Just for that practicum.
You got it.
And then come summertime we have those seminars.
Yeah.
Okay.
Each 348 and 448 both have seminars attached to them. So they're both 21 hours. They look the same. Yeah.
So, this may be a silly question, but
No silly questions.
since we've already applied for practicum, do we have to do any sort of registration on your?
No, I don't think so. I think Penny registers you.
Okay.
Yeah.
And then what about for the seminars? Do we get to pick or do we get put into our seminars?
You get put into your seminar group. However, if there is a conflict, then you go and you talk to your seminar instructor and you talk to the instructor's class, whose class you would like to be in, and you see if there's a possibility for a switch. Usually there isn't because these classes are full, but I mean, we had an example this semester, someone moved from my class to another class because it worked better with their wife, and that was fine. Yeah.
So if you're not doing your practicum in Saskatoon, are you still expected to drive to do these seminars?
That's a great question. Usually we offer an online seminar. Yeah, for people who are not in Saskatoon or Regina, or I think it's a 150-kilometer radius. So if you're not 100,
Doesn't fall in that, does it?
pardon me?
PA doesn't fall in that, does it?
It does not. I don't believe. Depends on Google your address.
147.
Pardon me?
It's 147.
It's 147. I mean, you could probably argue it depending on the size of the online class to get in there. If we're being real. I think there's a benefit if you can make it to come, but I also understand with weather and stuff, it's not always feasible. Yeah. Anything else?
Can I mention something about
Please do.
summertime practicum? Because I know you had said people take holidays and that sort of thing. The other thing that I've heard from students too is sometimes there's no clients around because they're out enjoying summer as well.
Yeah.
So it's something to
Yeah.
consider.
It's not a great time to do your practicum, but if it's all that, if you're really, that's the only opportunity you have to do it, then we are offering it, so we'll try to find you a place to go. But certainly we always say that doesn't mean we'll find you a spot. We'll try. Yeah.
Is there any assignments or anything for the seminar classes for the practicum?
Yes, there are. So seminars pass fail, but we have several assignments that you do. Just because, yay! Most of them are pretty useful. I would say all of them are useful, actually. All of them are useful. One is a learning agreement, which is a contract you develop with your agency about what you plan to learn, what your learning objectives are, how you plan to achieve those, and how we will know and be able to actually measure that you have achieved those goals. guys are distracting me with your chatter up back there. It's okay. And I get distracted and then I can't think. The other one is you do a photo voice assignment. So you take some pictures and do a small presentation to your class. These are really basic descriptions. There's a lot more to this. You also do a final assignment, which can look a lot of different ways. And you're also expected to do a weekly journal about your practicum experience. Each professor is slightly different. We have academic freedom, so our classes can look differently from one another, but generally they follow that framework. Yeah?
When you say classes, do you mean like the seminars?
Yeah.
Okay.
It's the same thing. It's 3 hours where you go and sit in a room.
Okay.
Yeah. Yeah. We call them seminars because there's not really any kind of teaching that happens. It's more like a group discussion, group supervision, but there is a field liaison there to guide your learning. They're fun. They're a fun time, I think. Well, Tony and Sharon, you've been in them. They're fun, no? Yeah, I think they're a good time. I like them. I feel like people learn in them. Okay, anything else? Okay, sorry I don't have all the answers for you, but they will become available as you're going through this. Don't worry about the content of your seminar, rather just know that you will be expected to do some work, but you will be graded pass-fail on that work. So it needs to be good, but we don't want you to be stressed about like, am I getting an A or a B in these classes? We want you to just experience the learning. Sound good? Okay. So the last thing we're going to do before we take a break is we have this commitment to professionalism, and it's 2 pages here, but this is essentially what we have you recite at our practicum launch ceremony. And we have you say this because we think it reflects not only the values of social work, but our mission statement as a university. And so I like to say that if you read through this and you think, this doesn't exactly hit on all the notes I would like it to, we're also open to adapting it too. So this is the first one. Has everyone had a chance to read that? I'll give you another moment. Okay, and then this is the second part. Can you see that? I can, yeah. And you will also, when you come to the launch, you'll also get it printed out because we don't expect you to memorize it. Imagine if we did. That would be very cruel.
We could probably have copies at the front too if people want to grab them.
Like can
ahead
you
of
just
time.
leave ahead of time? That's a good idea. Yeah. So we're gonna,
So are we all going to be saying this all individually?
No, we're going to say it as a group. We're going to practice in a minute here. Because why not, right? We're all here. Yeah. So we're gonna practice. It's actually, so I have to tell you that this we just did this ceremony for the first time in the spring, and it was actually really moving when everyone did this together. And then you receive a pin from our faculty. All come and you receive a pin from them, and it was just really cool because it felt like we were all like really just marking in a really special occasion. And some of our faculty members were a little cry. So, just saying. Not to put pressure on them for that to happen again, but I think it might. Okay, so let's just practice saying this together. So, I'm not going to leave my mic on for this. Okay, so we good? We'll just take a nice slow pace, and then I'll change the So 1, 2, 3. As a social work student, I am cultivating a professional identity grounded in respect, integrity, confidentiality, and competence in professional practice. As such, I commit within the university, field settings, and community to adopt professional and ethical behavior and adhere to the values, integrity, and standards of the profession through my words and actions, to respect the inherent dignity and worth of persons and pursue social justice and service to humanity, to strive for professional competence by accepting responsibility for my education and by being an active lifelong learner, to support my colleagues and encourage their commitment to the Code of Ethics of the Canadian Association of Social Workers, to uphold these standards as I continue my undergraduate education and develop within the social work profession, to uphold the Faculty of Social Work's mission statement to be informed by the principles of indigenization, sustainability, and social justice, and work to identify the needs of the disadvantaged, marginalized, and oppressed, to confront structural inequalities and work to empower individuals, families, and communities to realize their full potential. I voluntarily make this commitment. Well done. What excellent orators you are. Very nice. So, any questions about that? If you have any concerns with it, just send me an email. Again, this is a work in progress, so we're always open to having it really reflect what we want it to say. So I definitely leave that to you to let me know if there's anything you want me to tweak in there. And any last questions before we take a break? Okay, I have one comment to make on that sign-in form that you filled out. If you're coming to the launch ceremony and you put 3 people, Penny just wants you to try to find someone who's not coming or is only bringing 1 person, just to put your extra person in that number slot.
It's hard to explain.
It is kind of hard to explain. Yeah.
So for example, I'm not going to go, but I'm going to give my spots away. I still put them by my name.
Exactly.
Okay.
Yeah. Well, or just like say like in brackets, so I'm taking so-and-so's spots, whatever. As long as it's clear. Just because Penny orders food for this, and we want to make sure we have food for everyone, and chairs. That's all. And we can't fit, like, if you want to bring like 12 people, it's maybe possible if 6 people aren't coming, but you know what I mean? We have to sort out the numbers, that's all. Any other questions? Okay, so we have the panel coming at 10:30. It's 10:05 right now. You can take a nice long break, but I just ask that you be back here in your chair at 10:30 just so we can start right on time. And again, so I'm going to get you, when you're speaking, to talk into the mic. It gets less weird after you hear a little bit. But so I'm really happy to introduce you to our your fellow students here who are finishing their program this semester. They're doing their social work 448 right now. And so we asked if any of the folks doing this would be interested in coming to talk to you today. And lo and behold, 5 of them were, maybe even 6. Let's see. No. We weren't sure how many people were coming.
Oh, we are 6.
Oh, you are 6. Okay. Is there an extra chair anywhere that no one's sitting in? Oh, there's a bunch there. Perfect. You're going to grab the chair. And so what I'll have them do is introduce themselves to you and maybe tell you a little bit about where they're doing their practicum now, and also where, if they did a 348 practicum, where that was. And then I'll open it up to the rest of you for some questions. And then if there aren't a lot of, I'm sure there will be questions, but if there aren't a lot of questions, we have some questions for you. So can I start with you? We'll just pass it down.
Yes.
Okay, thank you.
Hi everyone, my name is Aaron Cruz. I'm currently having my practicum at the Saskatchewan Advocate for Children and Youth. And to give you guys a little bit of a quick rundown of what that place does is that the main premise is that we advocate for children, but all over Saskatchewan. We're an independent office. That's part of the Legislative Assembly. We have pretty much 4 departments. One is advocacy, second one's investigation, the other one is administration, Hold on, I gotta catch my breath.
We should have started with
I was
you,
at a
yeah.
meeting prior to this, and I was like, oh my god, it's 10:20, I gotta jet. And I don't park in the parking lots because I have this thing with parking. Anyways, I park all the way at Preston, so I had to book it all over here. Anyways, yeah, and the fourth one, I lost my train of thought here. The fourth one is investigations. So all these 4 branches within the office, we pretty much work with the jurisdictions that deal with children, like Ministry of Health, Justice, Social Services, and Education. What else can I say about the office? We mainly work with people or kids in foster care or in the justice system, around like that. And then we do get a lot of phone calls though that come in that kind of deal with family law, but we kind of just give them referrals out. What else can I tell you guys? And we also do a lot of public education to schools, to reserves, pretty much everywhere in Saskatchewan you guys can think of, we're pretty much part of it. We have 7 advocates and 3 investigators. 2 of them do ERA work, which is called Early Resolution Advocacy, and that's pretty much if if a child is in care, and if the child needs anything, whatever it might be, like shoes, bed, money for camp, whatever it might be, we would advocate for that child to be able to get the funds to do that. Lots of stuff that happens in the office. The one thing I don't like about the office, I have to always dress up like this. The kind of social work I like doing personally for myself is the frontline work, where you can actually get in there and actually build rapport and trust right away with your clients, because it's probably the better way. In the advocate's office, we do that, but since we only have about 7 advocates, like, can you imagine how spread thin we are when it comes to all over Saskatchewan? So, but yeah, and then my previous practicum was kind of a pilot project. I got involved doing the Michelle Serrata Artists in Residence project, and it's pretty much, we had to interview people that we believed to be marginalized, and we would take a photo of them and create their image into a picture, and then attach it to a story, and then hold art shows, just to be able to present awareness of people who are marginalized. But the one thing that kind of halted the project was we ended up focusing a lot of profiling of clients, which, for our ethics, that's completely wrong, but it was almost difficult to find people to do the art project with, because you can't assume right away that person's marginalized just because it's profiling. So that was almost kind of a huge struggle of that project. But aside from that, both practicums, I'm learning a lot, huge experience. Yeah, I guess I'll pass along.
All right, hello. Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Kelsey, and I'm doing my practicum in the ongoing protection unit. So I'm downtown at Sturdy Stone. So typically we will get cases that have been transferred to ongoing, so they went through intake, and then it was determined that follow-up was needed and ongoing protection was needed, so our unit will get the case. We do a lot of stuff, so we have about like 13 cases, and then within those cases, each child is a child care file. So we will do everything from referrals to transporting children to and from visits, or setting up transportation for those visits. Just case planning with the family as well as extended family, so anyone else who wants to be involved in the case plan. I was in trial for the last few weeks because the lady that I'm supervising was in trial, so you get to see a lot of cool stuff depending on who you're shadowing. If you're in your practicum there, you'll see a lot of cool stuff, as well as you get the opportunity to do cover off for other coworkers, so you will be doing work for their files as well. I didn't do my first practicum, I PLAR'd it, so if anyone has any questions, maybe I can help you out with that. Yeah, I don't know what else to say now, but I'm sure you guys will have questions.
My name is Kiana. I am at St. Bernard Elementary School, so we do various things there. A lot of it's one-on-one counseling. We do quite a few referrals to outside agencies.
We also do groups, so in that, the groups there are pretty flexible, whatever you kind of see the need in students and stuff like that, you can really tailor it to them. But yeah, it's just a lot of one-on-one counseling. My first practicum was at the Friendship Inn, which was pretty awesome. You got to see get a lot to do a lot of the frontline work and see people of various backgrounds utilizing the Friendship Inn and, you know, different kind of backgrounds. So you really get a lot of experience, I found, from that practicum, so it was really awesome.
I'm Ivy Armstrong. I did a PLAR for my 348, so this is the first, I guess, practicum experience for me. And I'm working in the Saskatoon Health Region Mental Health and Addiction Services in the Adult Family Program. So many people don't know about the program at all because it's actually the only one of its type in Saskatchewan. Essentially, we work with families that have adult members that have mental illness. So we get referrals, self-referrals, referrals from all over, and we do counseling. So it's individual counseling, it's couples counseling, it's family counseling. Next week we have a group of 13 coming in, a whole family to work with. We're working with a family of 7 right now, which is crazy, but great at the same time. We do 2 psychoeducational groups where we provide mental health education to families as well, which is really cool. And my supervisor has just started a pilot project in July at the Dubé Center. So 2 half days a week, we head to Dubé in order to see families right there. So they can drop in to see us. We get referrals right at the Dubé Center, and we can schedule appointments there too. And what's really unique, and I think it's important to mention this, is we actually never meet the family member with mental illness or the patient that's in the Dubé Center. We provide all the support to families without ever meeting that person. So sometimes we might see them just because we happen to be there, but we do not ever meet with them. They're never a part of the service that we provide. And one of the important things with working with families is they have found that when families are engaged in their family members' mental health recovery, there are better outcomes and they avoid going back to the emergency room and to Dubé. So there's a lot of really immediate I guess, satisfaction in the work that we see. So it's a really cool place.
Hello, I'm Jenny Waldner. I did my 348 at Probations in Saskatoon Community Corrections, working mainly with charged individuals. And I'm doing 448 at CFS Saskatoon, formerly known as Catholic Family Services Saskatoon. There I do a lot of counseling on my own as well as group facilitation. It's a really good practicum if you're interested in that type of thing because they have a specific intern program where interns are responsible for their own caseloads for counseling as well as group facilitation. So I'm learning a lot and I'm really enjoying it. Yeah.
Hi, I'm Veronica Slade and I'm doing my major practicum at the Saskatoon Correctional Center. I'm doing a pilot project, so it's me and a minor practicum student, and we're the first students to do it. We work on the protective custody unit, and we work with men nearing the release date doing relapse prevention planning, and then release planning when they go back into the community. So the protective custody unit consists of individuals that can't be in general population, so that includes all the sex offenders, it includes members that have left their gangs, the geriatric men that are elderly, and anyone with mental health or cognitive delays. And then, so we do one-on-one sessions with the guys, and we typically meet with them each once a week. Depending if they're getting really close to the release date, we might meet with them twice a week. It's really interesting. And then for my minor practicum, I didn't do a minor practicum, I got a transfer credit because I had my youth birth certificate and diploma, and I had done 4 practicums within that program. So.
All right, questions? Feel free to ask someone a specific question, or you can ask a question that you would like everyone to comment on, or whatever you want, really. This is your time.
I'm just wondering if you get any say at all, like, I know with the first practicum, you don't get really as much say in like where you go, but with the second practicum, I was wondering if you get any more influence on where you go, because the practicums this summer for the 448 aren't going to be offered with government agencies. So, and you were saying earlier that it may be like the practicum, it may be like you may get a placement, but it may not be the one you want. So now I'm curious as to what do you mean the one we want? Can we say what we want? And how does that work?
I guess I can't compare it to 348 because I didn't do it, but with my 448, I was told we can't really say like a specific agency that we want to go to, but we get to say like the type of social work field we'd like to work in. So we kind of just put in order. My primary interest was justice, and that is where I got placed. So I do feel like they did tailor it to my interest. I just didn't have a specific agency in mind.
The other thing I would say is to keep your mind open, because you really don't know everything that's out there. I had no idea that the adult family program existed. My background, I'm a teacher and will be going back to schools once I'm done my practicum. So my when I went in, I said I want to do something around counseling because that's likely where I'm going to end up in schools. But I want something that's going to be relevant but different. Because I may never have another opportunity to do something like that. So I would say keep your mind really open, because I certainly have learned a lot from all of the people up here about the different possibilities and things that are out there, and it's really hard to know like all of the things that you might possibly be able to do. And so even if it's something you're like, I'm not sure if this is the right fit, like keep an open mind, because it may turn out to be the exact right learning experience you need.
For me, my 348 was like my dream practicum, or so I thought when I first got it. And I quickly learned that justice and government work isn't for me. So as much as you might think you want to go in a direction, you might not want to go there. And so now I'm at CFS Saskatoon, and that's like home for me. I love it, and that's what I want to do. So yeah, like I said, keep an open mind. Like I didn't want to go to CFS Saskatoon at first, and now I'm so glad I'm there. So.
Can I add to my question? I know it was a loaded question. So yeah, I guess like if you were in like our position with deciding if we were going to take practicum this summer, like for me, I planned on taking practicum this summer, but I've always wanted to go with like the ministry. But then when I found out that the ministry wouldn't be taking practicum students this summer, like if you were me, would you stick to your original plan of taking practicum this summer, or do you think it'd be worth it to wait to go where you really wanted to go? If you got to.
So I really wanted to be placed in a school, and I was very grateful that I got placed in a school. But you can't really do that over the summer months, so I had to wait. So it's just really what you want to do. If you want to wait for something that you really want to do, do it. If you want to be done, then go somewhere else. But it's really up to you and what you want to decide and where you want to go. For me, I really wanted to wait and get into a school, so like I'm glad I did. But being in a school, I don't think I'm going to be staying there. I'm not going to pursue a job in the school setting, so I don't know. It's a tough choice, that's for sure.
Yeah, I just want to talk to that as well. I'm in child protection with the government, and in my opinion, I would say wait for what you're interested in. Just because I think like my practicum is so great, and I would love everyone else to have that experience. There's so much to learn, and from all of the coworkers that I've been talking with, they say that you don't learn everything until 2 years in. And so you're constantly, every day you're learning, and when you think that you have a grasp on it, you're like, just kidding. There's so much extra stuff, you know? So it's cool, it's a really good learning experience, and I don't know, for me, I had the same situation as you, and I thought like, I don't want to regret not having that experience, so I waited, and in the grand scheme of things, what is a few months? That's what I told myself, you know, so.
Yeah. Thanks. Yeah.
You're welcome.
Other questions?
There's one over here.
Oh, yeah.
I had a question, I guess, for everyone, but I'm particularly interested in, I forget your name at the end, I'm so sorry.
Veronica.
But how do you guys keep your emotions in check when you have personal values that conflict with some of your duties? And that's why I'm very curious about you again, because you said you work with sex offenders. So if you're dealing with someone who's maybe a convicted pedophile, like how do you keep your personal emotions in check while in the field?
Actually, when I had my interview with Penny, like my background was primarily children and youth, and she had asked me, like it was kind of a question on the form too, like what areas haven't you worked with yet, and what areas are you not comfortable with? And I said on mine that men that have like physical or sexual violence charges were like my one area that I didn't feel like I was comfortable working with. And I was pretty scared going into my practicum of how that was going to look. And I was lucky to get a week of training at the Ministry of Justice at the Sturdy Stone building before we even went into the correctional. And I did discuss that with my supervisor. And I think it's just about trying to separate the person from their actions. With sex offenses, I think that's the hardest one because their offenses are against children. But I think if you're having a really hard time with it, to debrief, doing lots of debriefing with your supervisor, with your practicum supervisor, things like that. But basically, I just have to separate the person I'm working with and focus on what we're doing, even if I don't, agree with the things that they've done. But, yeah.
I just have two questions that are a little off. The first one is those who did the minor practicum, did you do classes at the same time? And if so, how many and how did you find it?
I did do classes at the same time, but I was also early pregnant at the same time. And so I ended up dropping one of my classes and I just did one. Had I not been pregnant, I think I could have done 2 or 3 with ease, but it just depends on your own scheduling and what you're used to. I normally work full-time and I coach 30 hours a week, so it was not a big deal for me to do that. But it depends on what you're used to, so.
Sorry, for my 348, I took 2 classes, I think. So it felt like forever ago. I think I took 2 classes and I also worked. So it was a lot, but you also have to set time for yourself and really practice self-care. That's really important.
And the other one, or kind of question is, with your placements, do you think that there's job prospects for once you're done your practicum? Is that something you're interested in, or are you concerned about finding a job afterwards? Not to freak you out.
Obviously, it would be really great if there was a job afterwards. In the beginning, I kind of had that on my mind a lot. And then I kind of realized, like, hey, I need to stop having that as my, I don't want to say end goal, but it was definitely in my mind. Just because I would be really disappointed if that didn't work out. But it just so happens that my supervisor is going on mat leave when I'm done. But with the government, it's all about seniority and putting your name on eligibility lists and stuff like that. But she said she would assist me in getting my name on the list and apply within. But so right now it looks promising. I don't think I would be in the same unit because, I don't know, you switch around a lot. But yeah, so for me, I think that there would be.
For mine, I have no job prospects, and I'm okay with that. I find lots of new social workers that I'm working with right now really live the contract life and really enjoy it. So it just depends on what you're wanting in life. I have a full-time job already, so I guess it's less of a concern, but my fellow students have already started applying for jobs, and a lot of people in our classes or in the First Nation University already have jobs too set up from their practicum, so it is possible. Something you can ask in your interviews with your practicum placement if there's a possibility for that.
With that one, I know Penny's mentioned a couple of times and other faculty members that as students, like it's unrealistic to have a job while you're doing practicum, but for some of us that can't be a reality. So have you guys been able to balance like keeping that work in the meantime, obviously with 448, it's a little harder. But maybe with that, have you like seek different financial assistance somehow, or how does that work?
For 348, I worked full-time still, and 448, I've taken an ed leave, unpaid, so, but I have, my partner works, so we're just tight on money.
I'm on a leave from my job as well, but I do have 2 part-time gigs on the side, I guess, and you have to be really careful, and I would really caution you about overworking. I have a lot of flexibility with the other jobs that I have in terms of what sort of shifts I take. And I will tell you, like today, I don't know about the rest of you guys, but to get out of bed on a Friday morning was actually really challenging because you're learning so much, you're really tired, and I know a couple of us had a pretty rough week at our practicum. So like you need to take the downtime and you need to schedule it in. And so I guess I'm lucky I also have a partner who supports me financially in that way, but you do have to be careful, I guess, not to overload yourself too much.
Just to touch with that question, I have 2 kids and I do the full practicum. I also do 3 other jobs on the side. So yeah, it's doable, but you have to do a lot of like time management and like work-life balance and a lot of self-care. It's wild, you guys. Like I teach dance. I work as a youth worker at my other agency I work at, which is STC. But working while you're doing a practicum, you have to also take in mind that it doesn't conflict with your practicum, because that's what's happening to me right now. I work for STC, but I also work for the government, and since I work for both agencies, I am actually restricted to what I can do in my practicum because of a conflict of interest. So, you know, if you find a job, you kind of have it almost very, very part-time, and make sure you don't have any conflicts of interest, because then you're gonna hinder your experience in learning at the practicum that you are at. So, but yeah, it's doable, just as long as you can handle it and you add that self-care aspect too. So
I have one more comment to make. And the hours that you have to do for practicum, like it's I don't know what it's going to be for this group, but it's a lot of hours and there isn't time really to take sick time. So if you're working and overloading your immune system and you're not able to do that, there really is like next to none. I know Veronica, actually a number of us, like we've had a lot of conversations around hours and what that looks like to be able to meet the standards that are required. And it's tough if you miss a day. You're gonna have trouble like getting caught up and staying on top of it.
Yeah, I also work on the weekends, and then I'm on a leave for my other job, so for me, it's not that bad, because I used to work full-time and then go to school full-time, so now it's like, oh, it's not that bad. But yeah, I don't know. If you have a good relationship with your workplace, right, and you can let them know if you're feeling overwhelmed and obviously take off days there instead of your practicum, right, because that's the most important. Schools, you know, should come first. But
I'm paying for it.
you're paying to work. But yeah, I know, like obviously in an ideal world you could just focus on practicum, but I don't think that's the reality for most of us. So just practice self-care and time management will be your best friend.
There was a question.
Some of you guys mentioned already applying for jobs for when you're done. Like how early do you need to apply for jobs necessarily if you're wanting one like once you guys finish in December?
So for me, I will put my name on the eligibility list when it comes out in November, and then I've sent my resume into our hiring lady there. I didn't know I should do it that soon, but my supervisor just said that you might as well get it in now. So they have it, and then you can follow up with them later on. So I felt it was pretty early, but yeah.
At my practicum, the 4 other students have already started applying for jobs, and they started probably a week ago. And a lot of the other students, I think, around the same time. But it just depends on when your practicum's done. They're done at the end of November at the First Nations University, so they're a little bit ahead. I'm going to start applying probably towards the end of this month.
I just want to go back to the previous question, just about if there was job opportunities of mine. I know when I got this, I was thinking, you know, it's a pilot project, maybe there will be job opportunities if there's not somebody already in that position. But now that I'm working in the correctional, I think I'm feeling like I would rather do community justice rather than correctional justice. So, and I don't think, because it's still ongoing, there's going to be new students in this next semester. Like, I don't think it'll be a job position for a while. I know that at my facility, some of the correctional officers do have BSWs, and like, so that would be an opportunity to apply for that and like start out casual. That's not what I want to do though. I feel like what the correctional officers do isn't for me. But my situation is also a little different because when I finish my practicum, I have a surgery in January and then I have to heal for 6 weeks. So I think I'll take that time to kind of start looking for jobs in the field.
Yeah, sorry. I have like a quick question. A question in terms of practice and ethics. Like, how do you break the silos? And this can be like to any one of you, but like, how do you break the silos when you're integrating other professionals and just like collaboration?
We get a chance to work with lots of other professionals, and it's with tact all of the time. Like, we're like, what is it that we can say, or how can we influence the system while still maintaining those professional relationships? And they'll have an opportunity to do IPBL as well, yes? Yeah. So I'm just going to give a plug to IPBL, even though it's been a huge pain in the butt, I will tell you that. IPBL is interprofessional based learning, where we get an opportunity to spend time with doctors, nurses. I have a nutritionist in my group, pharmacists, and myself. And we sit and we go through a collaborative case study. And I was really excited. It was an option for us, I think. Yeah, you're also doing it. Where we go 2 hours a week for 3 consecutive weeks. And I have found that it has been a huge learning curve in how to talk to other professionals. And I feel like every week I am disrupting the session in a positive way. Maybe disrupt isn't the word, but I am disrupting their thinking. I am, because I sit there and I hear, this one's on HIV and AIDS, and they make some pretty big assumptions about the client we're working with. And I sit there and I disrupt every assumption, every single assumption. And the only person coming to the team that doesn't have a medical background. So I'm like, you guys have to explain this to me. So being vulnerable to say, hey, you know what, I don't know this. I need your information or expertise so that we can work together, while still saying, hey, can we think about this in a different way? Can we think about the people in a different way? And the feedback so far I've gotten from my group mates is, one, I think you're the only social work student doing this, but I think there's about 6 of us. I said, I'm not the only one. We're doing this voluntarily, those of us who decided to. And they're really appreciating the different perspective, because they, you know, in this group, they're like, oh yeah, she's going to take this medication, we're going to admit her to hospital, we're going to do this. And I was like, have you asked her? Like, what does she want? Like, does she want to continue being an intravenous drug user? So then how does that interact? I asked the pharmacist this week, I said, so if she continues on cocaine and stuff, like, what would that do to the antiviral medication she's on? And these 2 pharmacy students looked at me and they're like, never had thought that that was even a possibility. Like, I think they thought the addiction would just disappear. And I said, so if she wants to continue doing drugs, like, how does that work, and how are you going to adjust your medication? And these students looked at me, and so that's like the entire session, and it's really an opportunity for me to influence other professionals in their learning. And it applies again at the hospital, because we do get in those situations at Dubé where we're working with psychiatrists or we're working with nurses, and we're teaching them how to work with families. And it's slow process and it's tactful all the time, and you don't expect change overnight, but that's a piece. And I think I'm going to pass it to Veronica. We're all in seminar together, so I think she might have something to say about this.
I think in my placement in the correctional system, I think part of the reason I would like to not be a correctional officer after is because I feel like even the correctional officers that come from a social work background tend to lose their social workiness, because our ethics versus the correctional's ethics are not, they don't align really. And so I think it's just still upholding our values and our ethics while we're on our practicum, recognizing when, you know, clients are being mistreated. I've already had a situation where I've had to report one of the correctional officers for being really abusive, to one of the inmates, and it's not something that it's not a fun thing to have to do that when you're like the student in your practicum, but then to just sit there and watch it and not say anything at all and just maintain the status quo isn't helping any of the clients either. So I've had to be in touch with my on-facility supervisor and then like my Ministry of Justice supervisor, and I think like I'm not a person that really likes conflict, but it's just something that you have to be willing to do. You have to remember that you're there for the clients, and yeah, to recognize when there is mistreatment and to voice it properly. Like, I mean, you don't have to get into a confrontation right then, but to speak to your higher ups about how to approach a situation and then to follow through.
I guess I can talk a little about that too. So recently I had a situation in a staff room, and apparently staff rooms are terrible at schools. So I had a couple EAs just asking me questions about some, like a student and then another student that I see in the staff room. We can't discuss those kinds of things. And I was so taken back by it, I didn't say anything. I shut down. So after the weekend, I went back and I just had these conversations with the EAs. You know, you just got to talk to them. They might not know what our ethics are. So I think it's really important just to, you know, provide education on those kinds of things.
Other questions? Yeah.
It's kind of a dumb question, but like when you go to practicum, like I'm scared that I'm just gonna be thrown in and not know what to do. Like, is there someone that's with you that like shows you what to do? Or
It's kind of all on the placement. At the Friendship Inn, I was thrown into it. You kind of just got to figure it out on your own. And I mean, don't be afraid to ask questions, especially to your supervisor. They're not experts either. So I mean, if you come at it, you're just curious. A lot of the times they'll help you out. And I mean, I mean, at the school, the social workers in the Catholic system have up to 7 schools that they go to. So it's just not feasible for me to follow her around to all, like she has 5 schools, my supervisor. So I mean, I'm by myself. But she also said to me, call me at any time, you know, if you have any questions or you're thrown into a situation you don't know, just ask questions, because that will be the most helpful.
I've done a lot of shadowing with my supervisor, and we do a lot of collaborative learning and collaborative work. We do our psychoed groups together. We do counseling sessions as a pair together, which has been really helpful. I take on some of my own clients, and I would say don't be afraid, especially after a while, to just dive right in. My supervisor was sick and then had a very large emergency in 1 week, and I took a group on my own, I took clients on my own, and the biggest thing that I learned was the connections that you make with other people at the agency, they're your lifeline. So clinical supervisor was in to see me right away to say, hey, what do you need? Knowing that you're going to cover this on your own. The addictions counselors we work with, same sort of thing. So you know who you can go to, and then ask. So this week I made a request on how we might approach some learning for my learning agreement, where I said, hey, can we talk about this in advance, figure out a way to address this particular learning need, and then we're going to tackle that this week. And if I didn't ask, she would have no idea that's something I needed or wanted. So putting those requests in.
I have found at my agency that I don't have as much supervision as I thought I might, just because I'm on a unit. My actual supervisor works at the Ministry of Justice, and it only comes in 2 hours a week, and that time is split between me and the other practicum student. I mean, we can email questions or phone if there's something pressing, but because nobody else on the unit is a social worker, they're all correctional officers, I can ask them certain questions, but other questions I kind of feel like I'm just figuring some stuff out on my own. But I think number one, you know more than you think you know, and I bring in my textbooks to like reference if I'm, you know, trying to figure out how best to work with this client and like what theory to use, like bring in resources, ask lots of questions. It might be that you need to do some kind of reviewing or researching to remember some things that are helpful, but also that your practicum liaison, like the instructor that's overseeing it is there for you as well. So if you're feeling like there isn't enough supervision or you're having unrealistic expectations placed on you, you can talk with them and they can like approach your practicum supervisor, and they can even do it in a way so that they're just kind of asking questions out of curiosity on the evaluation and trying to help you figure out a solution.
And I'll just add that when you're doing your interviews for your practicum placements, don't be afraid to ask questions about supervision. There was one, I did an interview this summer for Parkridge, and it wasn't a good fit for me, so I didn't take it. And because I didn't have the supervision I was going to want, they're going to be kind of rotating through, and I had that with my mini practicum, and it wasn't a good experience for me. So just don't be afraid to ask. Remember that you're there as a learning experience for yourself, and you have as much to offer them as they have to offer you.
So then since you declined that offer, you went to a different, like you got management?
Yeah.
Oh.
Yeah, I probably did 4 different places. Yeah, but we have a small group, so we have the luxury of being a little bit more choosy than groups of like this big, for example. So.
For myself, I have constant supervision unless my supervisor is doing her own paperwork, then she'll give me something to work on independently. But for me, that's awesome because, well, first of all, there's nowhere for me to go. There's no like cubicle or anything like that, so I just have to sit right beside her. But it's perfect because exactly, yeah. But it's good for me because I've never worked in an office before, so even the simplest things like faxing or scanning, or I had no idea you had to press 9 before calling out. So I was like, I don't know what's going on, but just like little stuff like that, and I find like I've learned so much better when I just watch stuff happen over and over and over again. And she said like a couple times, like, I wish I could just send you off, but like we have no room for you, you know. But I'm okay with that because everything that she does, I do along with her, so I feel like I'm learning so much better in that way. But just depends, like some people, if you're an experiential learner, you want to do it on your own. Like I know we have another girl in our seminar, and she has just been like given what to do, and she has had to learn it on her own, but in some situations she said it works better for her. So it just, yeah, it just depends. But also, like, I ask so many questions, and there's a lot of questions that I ask my supervisor that she doesn't know the answer to, because she says like, oh, I took my schooling so long ago, like things have changed. So it's good for her too, because then she'll look up stuff, and so I'll be teaching her stuff just as much as she's teaching me stuff. So it works out good.
So a question for the people doing like counseling stuff. So did you have any other like training before you started that, or is just what you learned in school? Because I'm interested in doing counseling, but the idea of like right now jumping in and doing my own counseling sessions is terrifying.
I know we both took counseling as an elective here beforehand. I read all the time. So my supervisor uses dialectical behavioral therapy as her primary mode of therapy. And so we have a lot of conversations around DBT. I have books. I read like crazy. It's been the quickest way for me to gain the knowledge that I need to be effective in the job that I do. And I ask lots of questions too. Depending on your site, you might get a chance to do a lot of observation beforehand, and that's something that I've seen. But I also know that my supervisor and I have totally different styles in counseling. And so that's been a topic of conversation, not that one is better than the other, but about where we might use things. And the more that we dive into the theory of it, last Tuesday we had 4 sessions almost in a row, and my supervisor said, you know, when I have a student, I go back to the pure method a little bit more, and so we can observe like the pure method of DBT being used, and that's actually what we're going to be focusing on next week is theory-based work. Like, so in dialectical behavioral therapy, you do a lot of validation, and then you challenge beliefs, and so we're actually going to look at the pure method, how it's applied, and use that as a learning before I get a chance to maybe use it a little bit more with clients. I come from a very feminist, person-centered approach, a lot of solution-focused, and so it's different, and you get to try things out or need to try things out to see what's going to work for your style and for your clients. And that's been interesting. I know we've been talking a lot about couples counseling because I certainly had no preparation for couples and family counseling, and it's interesting.
So I spend a lot of my time at Practicum doing counseling on my own, from individuals to couples to children to family. Just my personality, I was able to dive in without issue, but there's other students in my same Practicum placement that weren't as comfortable with it. For me, our Practicum placement, we did 4 days of orientation, very heavy on Adlerian focused therapies, as well as solution focused therapy. So there's somewhat of a framework there. They didn't just like leave you out in the cold. But I find for myself, and I think for most counselors that I've talked to, everyone's kind of eclectic and brings based on the needs of the individual. And you're way more capable than you think you are. And you have way more tools in your toolbox than you realize until you get in there.
At the Friendship Inn, I was just kind of thrown into it. And I think I was taking my communications class at the same time, so I really didn't have a lot of hands-on or even theories of like counseling and stuff like that. I don't know, to me it's like you learn on the job, and people that you're counseling will snuff out if you're trying a certain theory on them or you're doing a certain thing. They'll snuff it out pretty quick, and I mean, you gotta listen to them because you're trying to help them, so you really gotta listen to what they need and what they want. So that's just my little sheet of it.
Any other questions? Yeah.
Did you guys get asked about theory in your interviews?
I did not.
I did not. I studied my butt off though, because I thought that we were going to be asked about that. And then a friend of mine who was in her practicum there, I had asked her like what to study for my interview, and she's like, make sure you know like theories and different perspectives and all this stuff. And then after my interview, I was like, what? Like, I studied all this stuff, and they all laughed, and they're like, oh, it's a rite of passage, like. And so I went in there being so prepared, but I mean, in the end, it was good, because I got a little brush up on all of that stuff. But no, my interview was basically, why do you want to do your practicum here? And okay, we'll see you in a few months. So it was very casual, and yeah.
For my interview, it was very formal. They didn't ask anything specific to theories, but they do ask questions that kind of like poke at it, so they can kind of see where you are in your kind of education and how you can approach different kind of scenario situations at work, at the workplace you're going to be at, right? So it's not going to be like, well, what theories do you use in this scenario? It's kind of like how would you approach this situation, and kind of just want to see if you will bring your own kind of take with the theory that you've learned. So it honestly depends as well where you are. If the environment's more relaxed, then you're kind of, and yeah, you're not going to bring your theories, you're just kind of going to bring your grit, And then if you go somewhere, I guess for government agencies, they do kind of scan you for what your knowledge on theories are. But yeah, it's always good to be prepared though, regardless.
All my interviews, I was asked the theory question, every single one of them, but I would just keep in mind that you're a generalist social worker and you're not expected to have a specific practice tool set that you use for every single situation. I had theories that I'm interested in or interested in learning more about, and I just took it with that approach instead of I'm an expert in this theory.
The health region has a practicum interview guide that they use, and my supervisor actually said she'd made the decision before I came in that she was going to take me. And she also said, hey, we're not actually going to use the guide, so we sat and had a conversation. She goes, we have a lot in common, I know this is going to be a good fit, just based on my resume and cover letter, and so they will ask about theories, but we didn't.
You're good? Other question, yeah?
I do have another question. So one of you guys have mentioned about taking your textbooks into work. And so what textbooks would you think were the best to keep around, or do most of you not?
choices. Our counseling textbook's gonna be coming out for me again this week and talking about transference. You know what that is.
Nonviolent communication by Rosenberg, I think.
I kept my textbooks from the communications class, and like it had a lot about motivational interviewing in it, so that's the one I think I rely on the most, especially given my clientele. We can't force them to do anything, so about motivating them to make changes in their life, and I found that one to be successful.
I kept all my textbooks and I found them all really helpful. I'll flip through them from time to time. I took a child psychology, child development class, and considering I'm in elementary school, I found that to be very helpful. I whipped that out actually this week, so.
I kept all mine as well, and I go through them when I feel it's necessary, but my communications textbook I would say is the best, because yeah, like there's been times already, and it'll happen all the time, where you say the wrong thing and you think it's a good thing to say, but it's not. And then, you know, you're coming from a good place, but and when you're in like high stress situations, you know, you might, what you say might not be what you want to say, but yeah, I always look back at it, and it's been helpful so far. Oh, sorry.
Personally, I don't really reference my textbooks because I feel, I guess communications textbook is probably the more important one because you're always talking with clients and people all the time. But depending on where you're placed or where you work in the future, it's almost like you're always living on the edge of your seat, you know? So it's like, as long as, you know, you're approaching any kind of situation with empathy and actually, you know, caring about the person, the textbooks in the end, yeah, they're good for theories, but it's how you approach it, because you can know all the theories and reference back, but then if you don't even care about that person, right, then it's not going to work, right? They can see you're being, I guess, very inauthentic, because you're like saying, oh, well, I'm going to use this theory, instead of like, I just actually care about this person, I want to help this person, so everything almost kind of flows very naturally too. For me anyway, that's how my kind of approach, like, learning is great and having theories is great, but in the end, like, it's all about how you apply it, and you only apply theories kind of your own personal way, right? So, yeah.
And yeah, I think the other textbooks I found most helpful for ones from social work practices 1 and 2 that kind of do give you a bit about the theory and to reference back on, and then also if you're taking electives kind of based on where you'd like to go into in the field, maybe to keep those ones. Like I took justice studies and I took a sociology on criminology because I had always hoped to go into a justice practicum, so I find that those ones are helpful for me.
Other questions?
Yeah. So just a question. So, do any of you have to do any legal documentation? And if so, are you given any like guidelines as to how to do that? Do you have somebody kind of check your legal documentation in case that were to end up in court? How would a social work student be valued, I guess, in their documentation opposed to like a registered social worker?
In my first practicum, I did a lot of documentation with just my supervisors overseeing it, and because I worked in probations, I was at court all the time, and they just read it over and made sure it was, I guess, up to their standard. The biggest thing is, with all case notes and stuff, is just keeping everything factual and no feelings or no value judgments in it. And same with my current one, my supervisor sits down with me every week and goes through all my case notes.
We spend a lot of time charting. I guess they're medical charts at the end of the day, which I didn't ever think that would be how I'd be spending a lot of my time. But it's done, and then we review it or we talk through it and what needs to be included, what doesn't need to be included. And every time it's done by me, or I've been one of the counselors in the session, it's signed by me and by my supervisor. So both of our names show up on it and we both sign it. And if it's on a session on my own, it's the same thing. I sign it, supervisor signs it, because we review it together. And the health region did a really big orientation at the beginning of the semester for all students, and one of the things we covered was charting and things about charting.
For mine, I actually sometimes have to do interviews with my clients that are things that go right onto the CGIMS database, so that's like the criminal justice database, so it might be like an offender information report or like a primary risk assessment. So yeah, I think just getting somebody to oversee, I did get some training in the beginning on how to do the objective, and like, you know, when you're writing, you don't say I, you say like writer observed and things like that. Yeah, and then just asking questions if you're not sure on something, just getting somebody to read it over for you.
So every contact that we have with anyone, whether it be with coworkers talking about a client's situation or talking with their collateral, so their other resources, or the client themselves, everything that you do has to be documented and then put into a system called Lincoln. So if you're emailing a coworker about a referral that you've done and you are like saying, oh, ha, or whatever, you always have to copy and paste that email and put it on to Lincoln, and in a couple years from now, that could go to court, and then the judge will be looking through your email thread. So everything that you do, just make sure it's professional and don't have any outside like conversations within that email, because it will always be documented and it will always be with you, as well as just like when you're doing your contact logs, to be factual and not put anything that's not needed in there, because yeah, it'll always be there.
Other questions? Is that it? Any last burning questions that you might have, that you have 6 lovely humans in front of you to answer?
Now that you're now that you're working and you're practicum and you are seeing people regularly, how does that change the way you interact with like social media and the things that you post or don't post?
That's a good question. For myself, like I've always had everything blocked on social media, so very private, but just as of last week, I've kind of been thinking like I should change my last name on my social media accounts, because it is so easy to find people, and like we'll have cards that we give out with our contact information, and it would take a second for them to find you, right? So I don't really post anything that's too scandalous, but yeah, I think that it's important to be aware of that, because as a professional and as in the helping profession, you need to be aware of what you're posting. So
yeah, I wasn't thinking scandalous. Like I have children
like
or whatever,
yeah.
you know.
Yeah.
I was asked those questions in my interviews, so it's good to be prepared for that. I'm not big on social media, and I have a different name on social media than my actual name. So.
Yeah, when I got my interview with the justice system, I just kind of went through mine, and like I thought I had pretty high privacy settings, but I reviewed it and I locked mine down a lot more. Like you can see my one cover photo, and that is all. Like I don't have, and I have to wear my name tag around the correctional, and with all my clients it says my first and last name on it. So like maybe just using your middle name. It depends on like how comfortable you are with like people being able to find you, but like yeah, like my Instagram is private. I don't have Twitter, and my Facebook is like, I also cleaned out my friends list on Facebook before, so it's yeah, however much privacy you think you're gonna need.
Social media is something that we deal with in our job, actually. There was a family member of someone who posted a photo of something at Dubay, and we were asked, like, so do you work with this family member? Like, there's constant questions kind of on things that are on social media. And I think a lot of us tend to be like social justice advocates, and we want to post things up there, like things we're passionate about. You need to be careful. There was a nurse in, I don't know if it was in Saskatoon, who posted about her dad's care and got reprimanded by her professional body because of it. And something I can think of very recently is the new mental health ER that directly affects the clients that we work with, the families that we work with, and the families, some of the people doing the advocating are our clients. And so if you're a health region employee and you post that stuff up there, you could risk your job, potentially, if you're, in particular, if you're like venting or commenting about it. So you just want to be careful about what sorts of things you're sharing in what context. My supervisor herself will post stuff, but she won't comment on it. So she might post the announcement that the mental health ER is going to happen, but she won't post her feelings or comments about it, and that's kind of how she manages the two. But it can be kind of an ethical situation because we have an obligation to be advocates and to do some of that stuff within our ethics, but at the same time there are rules in the organizations that we work with, and so sometimes you're like on this fine line between is this okay or is this not okay? And I'd say like be on the side of caution, certainly, but depending, a lot of social workers who've been around for a while will push that boundary a little bit more, but you do have to be careful.
All right, any last questions? I feel like there was a hand on the back row. Oh, okay. Okay, so thank you so much for coming. Let's give them a round of applause. I know people really appreciate, I know people really appreciate you coming and giving your time. We do, and I think it's helpful information to hear it right from, you're in it right now and you're having these experiences. So to everybody, have a wonderful weekend, and we'll look forward to seeing you on the 17th for the Practicum launch. If you have any questions, I'm also curious, how many of you gave a theory a Google over the week? Did anyone give a couple of you did? Okay. Better than none. Anyways, have a great week. We'll see you on the 17th.